Hello, good evening, and welcome to the 12th edition of Montague Island Books. And it's great to have our guest with us tonight. Today, we've got an author who is an award-winning BBC producer and co-presenter of We'd Like a Word Books and Authors podcast, shortlisted for the 2020 Books Podcast of the Year. The author grew up in Belfast during the Troubles and went on to report and produce for BBC TV and radio. His claim to fame is making Pelly his dinner. Now, that's interesting. We'll have to find out more about that. And he's covered US politics, created a G8 summit in a South African township. He's gone undercover in Zimbabwe. He's conducted football crowds, reported from Swiss drug shooting up rooms, smuggled a satellite dish into Cuba, and produced the World Service's first live coverage of the 9/11 attacks on America. I've got a feeling we could have been here all night. We could have a lot of stories here. So he also
that was a particularly busy day that day.
He also taught in Poland. He drove a cab in England. He busked in Wales. He was a nightclub cook in New York, designed computer systems in Dublin, presented podcasts for Germans, and organised musical festivals. He lives in Buckinghamshire and has 2 children. And after all of that, he even has time to write some books. I'm very pleased to welcome this evening Paul Waters. Good evening, Paul.
It's lovely to be stuck on the island.
It'll get very cold, so I hope you brought something warm. So perhaps now you could introduce your reader.
Well, yeah, I'm glad that I don't know if we're on the island together. I hope we are, because if I did have to be stuck on an island with someone, then Chenab Mangat would be a very good person, because he's very capable and very good company, and you know, good stories and good fun around the campfire. It's that we'll probably have to build very high because it's going to be a cold island off the Cumbrian coast. And I met Chenab many years ago. We were both studying together literature, African literature. Was that right? It's all a bit long, or was it African history? I can't remember.
I think so, yeah, and a couple of computing as well, I think.
Stuff like that. And anyway, so over many years we have shared houses and many's a pint.
Sounds good. And would you, a very good evening to you, Chen. And would you like to come back to Paul on that one?
No, yeah, absolutely, and a good summary as always from a good journalist. And I would very much like to share a pint with him and with yourself, Joan, and many others. And I suppose stuck on an island, it's probably the local pub might be shut with lockdown, but you know, I look forward to having a pint with you all shortly.
Yeah.
Oh, I think Chen might have some internet issues because he's frozen, but we will hopefully come back to him and it should be okay. Paul can still see and hear you okay. So do you want to tell us a little bit, after I've done your sort of little bio there, do you want me to tell us a bit about your book and any, you know, other little bits and how people can contact you and get your book, etc.?
Okay, well, I happen to have a copy here. Oh.
Hey.
So this is my book. It's called Blackwater Town. There you go. You can read it. And nice and thick, good for, you know, propping up tables, holding open doors. And it's nice green spine. It's a I suppose historical crime thriller set in the 1950s on the Irish border. I'll read you what it says on the back. I should be able to do this by heart. It says, when maverick police sergeant Jolly Mackin is banished to the sleepy 1950s Irish border village of Blackwater Town, he vows to find the killer of his brother, even if the murderer is inside the police. But a lot can happen in a week. Over 7 days, Mackin falls in love, uncovers dark family secrets, accidentally starts a war, and is hailed a hero and branded a traitor. When Blackwater Town explodes into violence, who can he trust? And is betrayal the only way to survive? And it's got some very nice cover quotes from Frederick Forsyth and Peter May
Right.
Brian McGilloway, Tony Kent, Gerald Brennan, and the Reverend Richard Coles. So I'm very lucky with that. And yeah, so it's set in the 50s. There is a real place called Blackwater Town, which I have a kind of a vague connection to with my family. And it's near the border on the northern side. And I had relations who were in the police back in those days, decades ago.
Yeah.
And I based the book partly on stories that they told me, kind of the sort of thing that doesn't get in the newspapers or the history books. When you know, people sometimes say history is more about conspiracy or cock-ups, and they seem to have their fair share of both. So I thought some of them you have to be careful legally about telling these stories, but if it's fiction, that's fine. So for instance, I remember one story that I haven't used in the book, somebody telling me about the night they accidentally invaded the Irish Republic, you know, a convoy of, you know, vehicles, heavy machine guns, police, auxiliary police, and off they set. And before they knew it, they had occupied the centre of a town in the south of Ireland, which luckily one of them recognised and thought, oh, disaster, quick, U-turn, speeding up the road to get back into British territory. And luckily they didn't meet the Irish Army, the Irish police, or the IRA, and they got away with it that time.
Wow.
But there are all sorts of dodgy things, you know, some sinister things as well. People not being sure who, you know, is the enemy wearing the same uniform as them, or is the enemy shooting at them from the front or the back, and, you know, what their role is. And to complicate it, they were, I'm from a Catholic background, and they were Catholics in the police and in the army, of course. So they were, like any police officer, a target for insurgents, the IRA in particular. But they, as Catholics then, coming from the same community as the IRA, that was awkward, and they were a bit more isolated than their Protestant colleagues. And then there was some suspicion of them within the police, because I guess sectarian bigotry, the police is not immune to that. So, you know, some of the Protestant colleagues would have thought maybe they were infiltrators or traitors or this or that sort of thing. So it was quite an isolating experience, but that all makes for, you know, good stories.
Does.
And there's some ordinary decent crime in it as well, all mixed in, and, you know, with a bit of imagination.
What made you decide to do it set it in the 1950s? Was there any particular reason for that, or?
Well, two reasons. One, I thought that would be a safe remove. So if people are going to be offended, hopefully there's less risk. Because people were saying to me, no, don't write about that. Don't, you know, just don't upset anyone. You know, I've had people coming up to me in the street and kind of threatening me and this sort of thing. So I thought, well, the 50s, come on, that's ages ago.
Yeah.
And most of the time it's long enough ago, not absolutely all the time. And the other thing is that I'd heard so many good stories from there, but it's kind of a neglected period, I think. So when people think about Northern Ireland, they generally and understandably think of the Troubles that erupted at the end of the 1960s. And before that, since the border was drawn, nothing happened in most people's minds. But in fact, it was a troubled place periodically over the years. And in the 1950s, there was an insurgency. The IRA launched a campaign to drive British forces, including the police, away from the border.
Right.
And that was going to be step one in, you know, overthrowing the state. And there were other groups involved too, but mainly the IRA. And it was a complete failure, the real campaign, because they didn't get very much support. Some people were killed, unfortunately, but it's almost as if it didn't happen, I think, for most people.
Pushed under the carpet. Yeah.
And there are a couple of songs are the only real legacies of it. And so I thought it's something that it would be good to set a fictional story, I hasten to add, in it. But anyone who knows about that time will recognize parallels.
Great. And how did you, with all the different jobs and everything you've got going on, how did you find time
Well,
to write it?
I don't feel that I have found time at all, or that I do find time. I'm in awe of people like Tony Kent, the thriller writer, he's off to court in the morning being a barrister, and he's, I don't know, has a young child in the evening, and somehow on the train in between going into work and coming back from work, he's knocking off another 4,000 words. You know, you'd want to hate him for that.
Yeah.
And or J.K. Rowling, she used to, write in a cafe with one hand while jiggling a baby buggy with the other. I'm a lot slower than that, and I need to get a bit of peace to do it. And I don't know. I don't know what to say. I'm a slower writer.
Yeah. So did you have, when you were writing that one and you're writing the sort of second one now, do you have a structure, or is it just fit it in when you can?
I aspire to having a structure to fit it in, but in reality it's fitting in whenever I can. In theory I get up early in the morning and do it. In reality, I stay up late.
Oh, well, it's one of them, isn't it? And how can people get hold of your book? And do you have your own website and things like that?
Yep, I do have the obligatory website, which is www.paulwatersauthor.com, all one word, paulwatersauthor.com. And you can get the book in all sorts of ways. You can get it, there's an audiobook even. Where is it? There's even an audiobook.
Oh, great.
So you can get the paperback from your local bookshop. There's, I don't know, more than 100 of them have it in stock across the British Isles and France and Spain. But if it doesn't have it on the shelf, you can just ask them and they'll order it. Or you can get it online on, the usual big book websites.
Yeah.
And or as an ebook. Or if you prefer an audiobook, the paperback is published by Unbound and the audiobook is published by W.F. Howes. And it's narrated by, not by me, but by Patrick Moy, who's a good actor, who also does Hilary Mantel. So there you go. Who I've been listening to on an audiobook the other day. So yeah, just Amazon or local shop or Audible, anywhere you like.
And if they want to sign, if any readers out there want to sign copy, can they contact you via your website?
Yeah, there's a contact on my website, and there's a list of all the shops as well. And I love all these, and they're reopening again soon, bookshops. So that's great.
Next week here in England anyway. They're not next Monday, so I'm sure lots of people will be ready to rush out and spend all their book tokens and hard-earned money in the bookshops. So Chen, have you read the book? Is he frozen again? Chen, can you hear us?
Oh no, this is when he did. This is so he can admit he hasn't even read it.
But that face is just expressionless, so we can't even tell by his face if he's read it or not.
No, I have read it, and I really, I love the sort of juxtaposition between kind of what could be a twee 1950s, environment, and you think of like Call the Midwife or some kind of like cop series set in the in the North Moors, and yet actually it's the pregnancy of the kind of like the troubles there gestating, and it's kind of slight black comedy, but also black in terms of its prophecies of what comes up. So it kind of balances all of it quite well. And I love the fact that a hero is called Jolly, and he hates that name, because I think all of us have had nicknames we haven't liked in the past. So it makes him immediately human and accessible. I won't ask either of you two gentlemen what your nicknames were when you were younger you didn't like, but Jolly's a pretty bad one to be called by anybody.
Yeah. But you enjoyed the book, so that's good.
I did, yeah, absolutely.
Great. So what we'll do now is we will whisk you off to the island, Montague Island, which for people listening for the first time is a fictional island that was created by Mike Craven, M.W. Craven, on his Washington Poe series. And that's where I sort of come up with a name. And I thought, it's not a desert island out in the sun, it's going to be on the cold Cumbrian coast. And so we whisk you off there, and you can take 7 books with you of your own choice. So we'll go through them now, and you can tell us a little bit about each one. So first of all, Paul, what's your first choice?
Right, my first choice, it's hard, it's very, very hard. And there are lots of books that I love and that, but I'm going for a kind of upbeat approach, because if I'm stuck there and, you know, it's off the Cumbrian coast, so things could get a bit miserable. So I need things to cheer me up and brighten up my life.
Yeah.
And there's a book that has always cheered me up over the years. It's by Kingsley Amis. It's called Lucky Jim. I'm not a fan of everything that Kingsley Amis has written, but this one is really funny. It's, I guess, a comic masterpiece. And there's a guy, it's kind of post-World War II. He's a young academic trying to make his way, and his position is really insecure. And he's always kind of making faces behind people's back in a very immature way, getting drunk, getting hungover, trying to get the girl, getting in trouble. And it's famous for a classic, some classic bits about being drunk, and there's a classic bit about waking up with a hangover, which I will share with you if that's okay.
Yeah, of course, go ahead.
So 2 of us are drinking alcohol at the minute, so I hope this isn't how we feel tomorrow morning. So this is the morning. Dixon, he's called Dixon, that's his main character's name. Dixon was alive again. Consciousness was upon him before he could get out of the way. Not for him the slow, gracious wandering from the halls of sleep, but a summary, forcible ejection. He lay sprawled, too wicked to move, spewed up like a broken spider crab on the tarry shingle of the morning. The light did him harm, but not as much as looking at things did. He resolved, having done it once, never to move his eyeballs again. A dusty thudding in his head made the scene before him beat like a pulse. His mouth had been used as a latrine by some small creature of the night, and then as its mausoleum. During the night, too, he'd somehow been on a cross-country run and then been expertly beaten up by secret police. He felt bad. Anyway, it goes on, and it's really funny. And I'd recommend that to anyone who, it's a bit like listening to the Pogues for me. It always cheers me up to read Lucky Jim. There you go. That's my first one.
That's great, and that I think we've all been there with that kind of hangover at some point in our lives. But just the way the words are just brilliant. Love that. That sounds interesting. The book cover, is there a connection with the book cover? The book cover looked a bit different.
Oh, I don't like this book cover really, because I've had so many copies over the years, but then I give them away to people. So my favorite one was an older, scrubbier one with the guy's face and head and shoulders done in just a few strokes of a pen, which like me, because he's a bit of a vague person. Yeah. And yeah, there's a film of this as well, actually, which I don't think I would recommend. But the book is I definitely. The book
always wins, does it? Well, in most cases, the book.
Most cases, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So thanks for that one. So Chen, what's your first book to take with you?
I think, well, based on the fact we're going to be in a remote, windswept island, I thought I'd go for something sort of, you know, rather sort of spine-tingling. So it's a book called The Essex Serpent by Sarah.
My spine is tingling, and I don't even know what it is.
The Essex roots myself, so I'm biased. Eternity meets mystery. Who wins?
Could you tell us that again?
19th century woman.
Could you tell us that again? We missed all that. We missed all that.
Oh, sorry, terrible signal here. Modernity Meets Mystery, Who Wins? By Sarah Perry. You know, this Essex Serpent, and it's essentially this 19th century woman that ends up in this small coastal town in Essex, where she has all kinds of forward-thinking ideas, and she meets the establishment in the form of the local vicar who believes in, you know, the 19th century order pre-Darwin, and there is a serpent, or is there, slithering around in the rivers, and sheep are going missing, and kids are told to stay off the common, and it has echoes of a kind of like, you know, sense and sensibility around the romance side and will they, won't they kind of aspect. But fundamentally, the mystery becomes a kind of an excuse for a discussion of ideas. And ironically, you find yourself sympathizing a lot with the older 19th century vicar whose world is being terrorized by these new ideas in a sense. And he comes across as a far more sympathetic figure. So it plays with that.
If you have somebody in your house playing Call of Duty at the same time, you have to get them to stop.
Like, this can't be true. This is superstition versus. No, sadly, this is just. I think I'm looking forward to this island because the Wi-Fi signal is probably better there than it is here. I'm afraid, gents.
Well, we got the gist of that. So that was the main thing. So thanks for telling us about that one, Chen. And what's your second book, Paul?
Okay, let's see, what will be the next one? This one, can you see this one okay?
Yeah, Curse the Day.
Curse the Day, Judith O'Reilly, who's a northern writer, so that's good. And for me, Judith O'Reilly is the next Ian Fleming. She's the heir to Bond, sort of, maybe not Ian Fleming, the writer, but his incarnation in films, especially the Roger Moore films, and the James Bond with gadgets and larger than life and color. And there's some, you know, great villains in this, really good technology, and a kind of a beast. I don't want to tell you too much, but there's a really colorful villain with a beast. And it's, you know, she's got her tough hero, ex-assassin, spy for hire. And they, you know, there are people going to kind of subvert Britain in various ways, and they take them on. But it's really imaginative, and it's really colorful, and it's just big and fun. And I'd love to see it as a film. And this is the second one, Curse the Day. The first one, I've forgotten the first one is this is the sequel to Killing State. So Judith O'Reilly, Curse the Day. I'm sitting on this island, on Montague Island, and I want a bit of color in my life on a rainy day on the island. So this is Curse the Day will give me that.
And a nice big book as well, so keep you going for a while. So that's great. Yeah. That's not heard of her before, but it sounds interesting, that book. So we'll have to check that out. And Jen, what's your hopefully you've got a signal back now. What's your second book?
Yeah, hopefully you guys gents can hear me better now. There's one called The Thousand Autumns of Jacob de Zoet, which is a bit of a mouthful. It's by a guy called David Mitchell. And I'm slightly biased because I met some lovely people at university like Paul, and this gentleman was there as well, another great author from my university days. And it's basically, it's hard to describe what it's like. It's the Dutch going to Japan, having a port there. So it's modernity of a different kind, meeting tradition, but getting involved in local samurai disputes and Japanese medicine and Dutch trading and finance. And it's basically a novel of ideas crammed into about 300 pages. With a very kind of like human and humane kind of lead protagonist who ends up in these ridiculous, kind of slightly ridiculous, far-fetched escapades without giving too much away. And it's fundamentally questioning, you know, which is the right side and, you know, who are the barbarians. And so kind of a almost anti-colonial, but also saying the Japanese were actually fairly colonial in their own way. So a clash of civilizations in that sense as well, but just written like a thriller, but really like almost like a documentary book or something. So heavily recommended. He's the person. He's done quite a few other pieces of work that have really been dense pieces of kind of like allegory and sort of, you could argue, historical forecasting, he calls it. What would the world look like back in the day, and how did it turn out? And it's a good way of learning lots of Dutch swearing as well, because it's interspersed quite liberally. Not that you'd want to learn that on the island or anything, you know, but just in case.
It might come in handy, you never know.
You never know, yeah, close to the Dutch coast.
You never know. That's great. So another interesting book there. So we're now on to book 3 that you'll be taking to the island. So what's yours going to be, Paul?
Okay, well, I'm changing my order.
Ooh.
So Chen was talking
Ooh.
about a humane hero, I guess. So a humane writer for me is Belinda Bauer. This is a nice green
I've not
color.
read it, but I've heard a
Right.
lot about this book. Yeah.
So it's called Exit. It says there's only one way out and no way back. It's called Exit. It looks a bit like a hospital thriller or something, but it's not that. And the hero is a guy called Felix Pink. And it says, the most unlikely murderer you'll ever have the good fortune to spend time with. That sounds a bit weird to me. Now, I love Belinda Bauer's books. She's so clever and funny, always has a good story, really imaginative. And the other thing that stands out for me about her is that the great humanity of the characters. And for some people, the murderer, the villain is the interesting person, and everyone else is a bit drab in comparison. But she thinks, in a way, the murderer is the least imaginative person. They're a negative influence, and they're all these rich lives who some of whom they get shortened, suddenly shortened in the most unfair way. Those are the interesting, vital people. Right enough, this is an exception because I guess Felix, the hero in this one, is a murderer, but it's not at all in the way you'd expect. It's based around an idea of I guess, mercy killings and people who are coming toward the end of their lives, but it's illegal to be helped to die. You've been for court cases recently about that, and but they're not capable of doing it themselves, or maybe they just can't, but they want help to do it. That's the basic thing, and this is a nice man who's helping them.
Wow.
But things do go a little bit awry, and what's really going on here? And so it sounds sinister, and it is a bit, but it's actually really, really funny as well. So when I'm in the desert island, I'm going to be feeling a bit sorry for myself, maybe, with only Chen for company. And then I'll be able to read Belinda Bauer, and it's exciting, and it's really funny, and it's also very humane. So I'd be reminded about the inherent goodness of people. So I'd recommend any of hers, but I like this one particularly.
Yeah, it's a nice mixture, murderer heroes and bit of all sorts in there. So yeah, it sounds.
Yeah.
But I've heard other people saying good things about that book, so they're a good choice there. Chen, what's your book number 3 going to be?
Well, also inspired by Paul's changing the running order, I'm gonna go with the theme of goodness, and I'm going to choose Shame by Salman Rushdie. And there's a particular character in it who's the antithesis of goodness, the great name of good mad news. So I'll give you a small quote to give you a flavor. This is a small town in Pakistan in the desert. It said, "Listen, you could have taken the whole quantity of sisterly love inside Good News Hider, sealed it in an envelope, and posted it anywhere in the world for a 1 rupee airmail. That's how much it weighed." Where was I? And it's just full of these vignettes of these kind of picture portraits of people in that way, often rambling and discursive, which a lot of Indian and Pakistani storytelling can be. And there's not much redemption in it. There's not much hope in it, but it is quite funny. And, we'll need a laugh on the island, and we'll think of maybe some warmer places. Not that Paul's company won't be enough, of course.
No, I'm getting scared of your insults. If that's the sort of quote you're taking from that book, I'm thinking you'll be accusing me of something over the fire, and I'll just be, I've nothing to come back with on that.
It'll be in Dutch though, so you won't understand the insults.
Yeah, okay.
That'll be all right.
Great, that's an interesting one. And I imagine that'll keep you going for a while, the discussion on both of those 2 books, really. So we're now down to book number 4. So what's your 4th book going to be, Paul?
Well, I might be missing my family, I suppose.
You might.
I might be, yeah. So this is a family history. It's called Blood Dark Track, and it's by Joseph O'Neill. And so it's a history of his family, kind of based mainly on his 2 grandfathers. One of them is Irish, one of them is Turkish, kind of an Armenian minority inside Turkey, I think. They were both imprisoned around the Second World War. The Irish one, he was imprisoned by the Irish government. He was interned without trial. He was an active member of the IRA. And the other grandfather, he was imprisoned by the British in Palestine. on suspicion of being a spy. And so he, he's in his 30s, he set out, this guy Joseph, to find out about these two guys, because he'd heard stories and rumors, but who were they really? Was one of them really a spy? Was the other one really a hero? What was going on? So his parents met. I think his dad was an Irish engineer putting in oil pipelines in Turkey. That's when he met the mother. And he lived in various parts of the world, and his family are scattered, the Armenian diaspora. But I love the way that he paints a picture of life in Turkey, in this minority, and then also in Brussels, I think, and in the United States, but then particularly the grandparents, the grandfather going along, hobnobbing with British and Germans and French in the different parts between Turkey and Lebanon and Palestine, and the Irish one as well. And there's a dark secret. There's something that doesn't really reflect very well, potentially, on his family, a bit of a stain, the sort of thing you'd like to think, in the TV program, Who Do You Think You Are? And you want to find some heroic predecessor. And if you already know you've got a heroic predecessor, you don't want to find out something that's maybe not so heroic about them.
Yeah.
But he follows this trail, and it says interesting things about Turkey and interesting things about Ireland that are quite challenging, and challenging for his family, I imagine, as well. He might not be very popular, and but I really, really enjoyed it, and it's an appreciation of family. So I may as well look into somebody else's dark secrets and think kindly of my own.
And it's worldwide as well, isn't it? With that, you've got bits coming in from every direction on that story.
Yeah. So the title is it's taken from a W.B. Yeats poem, and it says, this is just from the front of the book. It says, "Someday we shall get up before the dawn and find our ancient hounds before the door, and wide awake know that the hunt is on, stumbling upon the blood-dark track once more, that stumbling to the kill beside the shore." And
wow.
Yeah, it's really, really good.
Yeah, great book. Interesting.
Highly recommend it.
Not heard that one before. That's great. So, Chen, what's your book number 4?
I'll go with, I think, at the End of Days by a German author called Jenny Erpenbeck, who I think is very big on the continent. And it's basically, she takes ideas of contingency and agency and the decisions we all have in different forks of our lives, and she expands that into book goals. So it's one life, and you could argue it's cliche and glib, what are the different choices and how a life could have turned around. And I think what makes it a really compelling piece of work is it's quite short, but each of the different chapters and outcomes are very plausible and very, very logistically, put together. So you don't feel cheated, but as you sometimes do by these sort of things of serendipity and, of course life would turn out like that. Well, actually no, but it does make a cohesive sense. And the most bizarre thing of it, which I think a lot of people who read it share, is that when you read all the multiple lives of this person, you still think that all of them could have happened. It sounds contradictory because only one of them could have done, but it's quite bizarre how it does that, and sort of plays into things of how we contain multitudes of ourselves of different stories, how we can, they may clash, but we think they're both all cohesive. I
must admit, I thought it's amazing at how we contain marmalade.
German.
I think that's what you're saying.
Like all the best Paddington fans, we do. And yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting sort of almost clash of ideas, but within itself rather than between nations. And you end up admiring and being quite fond of all these different varieties of who she could be, the protagonist, even though some of them, are actually quite unpleasant things that she does, which shows you the power of an author to do that, to make you respect the main part of the book, even though you may not like what they do. So yeah, I heavily recommend that. It's very short as well. It's quite incredible how you can cram so much into sort of 200 pages.
What's it called again?
The End of Days, Jenny Erpenbeck.
The End of Days.
Probably pronounced terribly, I'm afraid.
Great. We're getting a real hodgepodge of books and influences from everywhere here, aren't we? So that is really good. So we're now moving on to book number 5. So what's your 5th book, Paul?
Well, I suppose I have travelled a little bit away from home to Palestine, Turkey a bit, but let's go further to India. So I read this recently, and it's called Sea of Poppies by Amitav Ghosh, and it's the first of three. The others are River of Smoke and Flood of Fire. I'm not sure if I've got those the right way around. I haven't read them, but I have read this one. And Sea of Poppies, and it's set in India. It's set between India and China and Mauritius, but mainly India. And the Sea of Poppies is so the idea was in Britain is ruling India and is compelling people to grow poppies to make opium, which they will then sell to China. So it's before the opium wars in China. So Britain said China is obstructing free trade, so we're going to war to fight for free trade, which is like basically the same as civilization and God.
Yeah.
And I guess the Chinese were saying, yeah, this is narcotics. This is a bit like, you know, the Medellin cartel invading America to say you're interfering with free trade here. So and the characters are the first person you meet is a widow who's I guess her life, her husband is an opium addict. He was a war veteran and was wounded, so it helps with the pain.
Yeah.
She herself is raped on her wedding night by her brother-in-law while forcibly drugged with opium. Their village is declining because they can't grow normal things and food. The economy is all distorted. People are being sold into kind of indentured labor to work on plantations, and the various characters are different levels. For, you know, extremely rich princes, all the way down to peasants, and sailors, and it's the language is so imaginative as well. It's loads of it's very strange to me, kind of colonial British Indian phrases, and some of the British characters are deliberately speaking a form of Hindu that is quite ramshackle because they don't want to lower themselves by speaking proper Hindu and being like the natives. That would be ugh. You have to have a distinction, so don't speak it too well. And it's there's a lot of spiritualism in it, or yeah, not of any particular religion necessarily, and lots of nautical terms, and it's so imaginative, bringing, I guess, people of mixed race from the United States and China and Southeast Asia and kind of converging them on India. And the other thing that struck me about it was that I guess maybe we think, well, maybe not you, Chen, but the two of us probably think of like the world kind of starts in Europe and spreads out from there to some extent. You can't help thinking that.
Yeah.
But here it's, you know, India is such a huge powerhouse of energy and industry and imagination today as well, and in the writing of books like this, and so many stories and such, you know, richness. It's just a huge bath for your imagination just to sink into, and it's fun and exciting as well. So I'd really recommend it. It's nice and thick.
Yeah, great.
Sea of Poppies, and it's the start of it when they're going down river, and it's as if they're going through snowfields because the poppy flowers, they're all white. The harvest is late this year and everything is white, or it's like ashes have fallen or something like that. And it's kind of beautiful imagery. There you go.
Right, great book. And I know you've not read the other two books in the series, but is that following on the life? Is it the life of the main character?
Yeah. Well, this one ends, they're on the way, kind of indentured labor, to Mauritius, and then the other two pick up. So I don't know if it goes into the Opium Wars, but they're certainly gearing up for a fight. The British are, they're gathering their ships and justifying the morality of it.
Yeah, it's interesting as well. You were saying about the fact that you know, as particularly as sort of Brits, that you imagine everything goes out from Britain because of the way the atlas is. You know, you look at an atlas on the school wall, Britain's right in the middle.
I know,
was,
pity the poor New Zealanders.
yeah, and it was saying, I was reading an article a few weeks ago, and it was saying what every household, every school should do is get maps where maybe India or Australia the centre, and they would learn so much more about, you know, because you know, you look at the standard British map, and it is like the centre of the world, and it was very interesting to hear how children's views change when they see a map, say, that's centred on India or wherever it may be. So that's
I know. And the sad thing is that all these people in Britain are presuming that Britain is at the centre. Actually, Ireland's at the centre. You just happen to be next door.
I like it. I like it. And Chen, what's your book number 5?
Well, no, I'll go just very quickly on that very interesting point about the centre of the world. I've got a good friend who lives in Greenwich, and I don't think she'll like the centre of the world move from the Greenwich Meridian. So I'm radical talk there, gentlemen. Moving swiftly on though. I'm going to go for, if I'm allowed poetry. I think the best of Billy Collins, and he's an American poet, a modern American poet, and he basically takes everyday moments and objects, and he makes them into sort of, through that alchemy, turns them into beautiful short poems. And 2 quick examples. One is a poem about the power of turning 10. So you need more than just 2 hands to count your age, and it's been like at that age. And the other one is a poem about objects, the everyday objects you're surrounded by, without a lamp, in my case, near me. And he writes a very moving piece about how the lamp will outlive him. It'll still be there, even in a skip. And it's full of this kind of rhythmic sequence of poems about concepts that you don't necessarily think about, but he makes you address them, but again in a kind of witty and sort of not too terrifying a way. Although when you finish a book, you kind of, you know, similar to his kind of Emily Dickinson, you kind of lean back and think it's a big scary world out there. But so he pulls off quite a trick. So anything by Billy Collins, highly recommended.
Great, that's very interesting. So we're now on to book number 6. So what have you got for number 6, Paul?
Well, I'm feeling bad. This is one of the problems with the choices. I was thinking about poetry. Anyway, I kind of want an extra poem. Can I just stick in a poem in the middle?
Go on.
Okay, I'm going to give you a poem. This is like cheating. So this isn't my number 6, right? This is The Historians.
This is a commercial break.
If this is commercial break. So this is by Ivan Boland, who died not so long ago. And this is a poem called The Fire Gilder. I think it's about her mother. Anyway, she loved silver, she loved gold, my mother. She spoke about the influence of metals, the congruence of atoms, the art classes where she learned these things. Think of it, she would say, as she told me, to gild any surface, a master craftsman had to meld gold with mercury, had to heat both, so one was volatile, one was not, and to do it right, had to separate them and then burn mercury until it fled and left behind a skin of light. The only thing, she added, but what came after that I forgot. What she spent a lifetime forgetting could be my subject. The fenced-in small towns of Leinster, the coastal villages where the language of the sea was handed on, phrases bruised by storms, by shipwrecks, but isn't. My subject is the part wishing plays in the way villages are made to vanish, in the way I learned to separate memory from knowledge. So one was volatile, one was not, and how I started writing, burning light, building heat, until all at once I was the fire gilder, ready to lay radiance down, ready to decorate. It happened with, it never did. When all at once I remember what it was she said. The only thing is, it is extremely dangerous. I find that kind of funny, I must admit. It kind of makes me chuckle. I don't know
definitely.
why.
Very good. Interesting that.
But my book, that's Van Boland.
Yeah.
This
commercial break over there.
The Blue Tango. You can't really read it. It's all very vague. The cover, it's indistinct, and that's deliberate. This is by Owen McNamee. This is one of my favorite books, and it's set in the 50s, actually, a couple of years before my book. And it's there's a murder. A woman. Was a very famous murder in Northern Ireland of a woman called Patricia Curran, and who was a judge's daughter. And this really happened, and the man was jailed for decades. He was an English airman, I think, like a ground crew guy. And it was a miscarriage of justice. He was eventually released after decades in prison. And there are various theories about who really did it that point a lot closer to home. But so he's done a fictionalized version of it that delves into the murkiness and the claustrophobia of Northern Ireland society.
Ooh.
And it's like this, I hadn't really heard of it until I read this book, but it was huge news at the time. And about I suppose, the corruption and subversion of normal law and order and morals and decency between hidden behind class and money, and I suppose some of the corruption of the Northern Ireland state at its roots. And it's such like a book that gets inside your head, and kind of darkness, and it's so rich, and I really love it. And in my book, there's also a real crime, not like this, not a murder, that was known in those days as the Hen House Boy. Seamus Heaney wrote a poem about it, and I've got a version of that. But this one is it's just, I don't know, it's quite soupy. Imagine it's like going through treacle, but in a good way, and it's mysterious treacle and dark, and it's just really great. I love it. And he's written other books that are much kind of brasher as well, but he's often in the murky shadows of Northern Ireland, whether it's state assassinations or murder trials gone wrong. Or anyway, this is my favorite, The Blue Tango by Owen McNamee.
Great cover as well. It's very very interesting cover. The more you look at it, it's very,
that's a picture of her, I think.
All right.
An old photo back then.
And
yeah.
Interesting book. Wonderful. So Ken, what's your number 6?
I think going back to novels, I think The History of the Siege of Lisbon by Jose Saramago, pardon my pronunciation of his name, and basically picture the scene. There's a copy editor in a publishing house in Lisbon, and he's got a history of the city he lives in, and for a variety of reasons he doesn't quite agree with it, partly because it may be wrong, but partly he's got his own opinion. And he starts changing the proof copy. So it's about publishing, but it's about cartography, literary cartography of the city, but also cartography of psychology. And as he writes, he changes the actual space. So it's a fort that he doesn't think is that important. He takes it out of the book, and the fort disappears. And you're not sure if it disappears in the ersatz reality of the book, or whether it's just in his mind. And it's just beautifully done and very clever, and it leaves you quite confused. It makes you want to get them and explain to Lisbon. Which was also quite good when a book can do that. And Saramago is amazing. He's got this kind of continental style of he'll write a whole sentence which is like 7 paragraphs long in a normal English book, and you think, I'm not going to read this, but you do, and you find yourself changing the rhythms of how you read other things after that. So he really gets in under the skin, so to speak. Right. It's also quite witty because he has lots of jokes which translate surprisingly well to an English sensibility, I think, coming from Lisbon, which I'm not a great expert on. So that's quite an interesting resonance. You don't think you'll come across, but you do. So heavily recommended with a plate full of custard tarts and a strong coffee, if you can't get there.
I read his one, The Stone Raft or The Stone Boat.
Oh, dark. Heavy.
That's when like Iberia drifts off into the Atlantic and bumps into America.
Yeah.
That didn't really grab me 100%, I must admit.
I'm with you on that one, yeah. A bit
but this sounds good.
I think he was probably on a bit more than a cup of tea when he wrote that, don't it?
This island we're on is stable, isn't it? Not drifting towards.
No, it's stable. It's very stable. Good. You'll be okay. The locals will look after you. So, what is your 6th book?
Excellent.
It's the 6th. Oh, gosh.
Sorry, we're on 7 now.
I think it's I think this is my last one.
Oh, yeah, 7th book.
So this is. Again, one of my favorite books. I recommend this to anyone. This is, it's called A Time of Gifts, and it's by Patrick Leigh Fermor, who's known as the greatest living Englishman. He's half Irish, but we'll let you have him.
The greatest living Englishman that's Irish.
Yeah, and in fact, the number who are Irish is growing. Not John le Carre. Who is it? Yes, he became Irish before he died, didn't he? Yeah. Anyway, so Patrick Leigh Fermor he's a real action man. He was, if you ever heard of the film Ill Met by Moonlight, when British kind of special forces, they kidnap a German general. He was one of those special forces in World War II who kidnapped the German general. And he went, before that, he left school when he was 18 in 1933 and decided, I'm bored, I'm going to walk to Constantinople. So he gets a boat to Rotterdam, I think, and sets off walking. And it's a trilogy. And the first part is he walks through Holland, through Germany, along the Rhine. He sees Hitler speak in Munich. He stays in great schlosses along the Rhine. He sleeps in barns. He eyes up young women. I think he meets some English artists or writers in Bavaria. And in book number 1, I think he gets as far as Prague, maybe, or Hungary. I can't quite remember. And but he gets to Hungary. But it's so rich along the way. Like the first time I read it, I had to keep looking things up, arcane pieces of German ecclesiastical architecture or different places along the Rhine. But it's so rich and such delving into Central European history and about, the sweep of Mongols coming and Turks and the Poles and people going back and forth. And it's also, he's like an 18-year-old walking across Europe. Although he didn't write it, so he kept diaries. This is supposedly based on his diaries, but in reality, he lost them years later. So he kind of made it up many, many years later while he was living in Greece, I think.
So is it part fact, part of it? Part fact, part fiction, is it? Or
well, it's supposedly 100% fact, although people have speculated that maybe it's not quite all fact. But I suppose it's like it's like somebody wandering through loads of different period dramas, a bit like if you were on the back lots of Hollywood in the 1950s, and one minute there's Jesus being crucified, and then here's Caesar, and there's the 7th Cavalry coming, and next minute Louis XIV, you're walking through his court. It's just so colorful and rich. And I come from a family of walkers. My father is a big walker. He's walked from the bottom of England to the top of Scotland and from one side to the other and up and down and across Ireland and from Paris to the far end of Spain and all this sort of thing. And so the idea, and he's not 18 anymore, but it's so rich. And this is just before Europe is once again ravaged by World War II and destroyed. And there's a picture of him. It's a lovely cover as well. There's a label on mine, but just a young guy with a haversack kind of walking into the sun, and there are castles and rivers, and it's really, really good. And if I'm on the island, I'll be reading this and I'll be transported to all sorts of imaginary places through the arts and the music that he talks about, as well as the landscapes that he's in. It's just wonderful.
It reminds me a lot of that story of the sort of traveling and sort of going through time. It reminds me of a book I read last year, which I really enjoyed, by Edward Rutherford, and it was like the history of New York. It was from the first settlers right up to 9/11. And the way he tells the story, you would believe that he'd lived through it all. And that sounds pretty much the same kind of thing.
Well, the other good thing about this is it has maps. So there's a map of his journey.
Can't beat a good map, can you?
I like a map. And it reminds me of The Hobbit. or Lord of the Rings and that sort of thing. So like chapter 1, it's, a splendid afternoon to set out, said one of the friends who was seeing me off, peering at the rain and rolling up the window. And they, they're on Curzon Street in London and Piccadilly and stuff like this. And then the next thing, he's on this tramp or trawler or something like that, slithering around and ending up in Holland. And it's just great stuff.
Hopefully a tramp steamer, not a tramp.
That sounds a great book. It really does, and perfect for on an island where you can just somewhere you can escape off to. So, Chen, what's your final book?
Well, I got to say that would be what was on my list, and it is a fantastic book for anyone who's not read it. It's hard to describe how brilliant a writer that man is. My one is a similar kind of theme. It's the 1940s. It's a book called Life and Fate by Vasily Grossman. He was a journalist with the Red Army, and it's a book about the end of the war when the Russians and the Soviets rather were starting to win the war, and it's a cast of thousands. And it's not like a 3-course dinner. It's more like a 20-course dinner, and you get it, and you think it's going to give me a hernia. And that's a great one as well.
Different one.
I think with that I could go on forever about this book. There's 4 things I'll just briefly mention. The first is I'm no expert on what it is about Russian literature and why it's different and why it feels different, but it does, and it has a power and a resonance, and there's something evocative about it almost when he's writing about fairly brutal 20th century aspects, but there is a sort of mysticism in some of the things he writes about. The second is Stalin has a habit of polishing off journalists and anybody else. So it's written in a very coy way where anti-government material, pro-government, and you kind of read it thinking, well, what a tightrope this man had to walk on, and he must have been terrifying. The third thing, very briefly, is how you can have a cast of thousands, if not more, and somehow bizarrely keep track of it. So maps in books are brilliant, and family trees in books are brilliant, and not enough authors, I think, use both. They're scared of them almost having a visual element in it, but I think it makes it come to life.
Yeah.
But even after a while, you don't need the family tree because you somehow organically, by osmosis, makes it seem quite sort of natural, and you can follow who everyone is after a while, which is quite an incredible achievement. Yes. And the fourth thing, which is amazing, is in certain parts of it, even though the Soviets are winning and they're pushing the Germans back and so forth, there's this hint of like history at the time. They didn't know the outcome, and this is what I find so fascinating about history as a whole. Sometimes it might seem obvious to us, but at the time,
I keep thinking that Stalin has got Chen. He's got him with a poisoned umbrella.
I think he's gone. Are you Chen? Well, fortunately,
terrible Russian accent there, but yeah.
Yeah, fortunately your internet stayed while you told us about the book, so that was really good. Well, thank you both, and but the thing about looking at it is you've got such varied sort of interest in the book because it covers all across the world. But if anybody else turns up on the island, you probably don't have a book somewhere about their history in your selection, no matter where they've come from. So that's great. Now, while you're on the island, it is rumoured that you get about 1 hour a day electric. Only 1 hour.
That's more than I get
here. So you're allowed to take a CD with you. Now, it can be a music CD, or it might be, something else, an audio book on CD, or whatever it may be. So, Paul, which CD would you take with you?
Well, I'm being very cunning. I'm kind of covering both audio book and music here.
Ooh.
So there's an album. It's called Jackie Leavin Said Ian Rankin.
Oh, Jackie Leavin.
So Jackie Leavin is this singer-songwriter who's got beautiful voice, and he's also fabulous at telling stories.
Yes.
If he hadn't such a wonderful voice, I'd say I prefer the stories he tells in between his songs.
Normally with a drink in his hand as well.
He's a bit like Billy Connolly in that way. It's like the stories he tells in between that are the most hilarious. But he tells these really, really funny stories.
Oh.
And so Ian Rankin's character in his Rebus books, John Rebus, is a big fan of Jackie Leavin, the real Jackie Leavin. And Jackie Leavin then kind of returns the compliment. He's got a song, John Rebus. And anyway, they got together, I don't know, 15 years ago, whenever it was, because Jackie has sadly died. And so they did a live show, Ian Rankin and Jackie Leavin, and Ian Rankin would maybe tell a wee story and read something, and Jackie would do a song and talk a wee bit as well. And they would kind of go back and forth, and they've both got such lovely voices, and they tell just these rich stories. And Jackie's ones, they draw on such unusual things, like he's got a song, Exit Wounds, which I think is about Elizabeth I hearing about the death of a guy she really revered, maybe loved, not necessarily was ever physically intimate with, but somebody she was very fond of. And thinking about, and she wrote a letter, I think, to his family saying how sad and how sorry she was that the guy had died, and describing the pain that she felt. And he has it in a song, and it's just beautiful. And he also does a cover of Say a Little Prayer. Is that Aretha Franklin?
Yeah.
Song? So he does a cover of that, which is just great. It's really great. And the two of them together, anyway, they're a delight. So I'd recommend that. And you see, they can be singing. And also, if I get sick of listening to Chen, then I can hear these two lovely, they're kind of both, Jackie has a kind of a Scottish accent, I guess. I don't know where he's from. Is he maybe from Sunderland or something?
Yeah, I'm not sure where he's from, to be honest.
Anyway, he's got a lovely voice, and so I'd be happy to listen to him and Ian Rankin as an alternative to Chen every now and then.
Yeah, and if anyone loves the idea of storytelling in a song, do go and have a listen to Jackie Leavin. It's Leven. Have a look on, I think there's some content on YouTube, but if you have a look on Spotify, you'll find some of his albums whose names just escape me at the minute.
What he's got, I love one of his stories that I liked, because he's not that famous a name, and he was trying to break America, and his agent was saying, "Oh yeah, I want to introduce you to this woman. She's, brilliant publicist, that she'll break the whole of the East Coast. We got to meet her. And anyway, so they're in the restaurant, and Jackie's behind him, a little bit shy, and the guy says, "Oh," and he sees her across the restaurant. "Hey, come on over." And she comes over, and they're hugging, and she's, "Oh, do you know Jackie Leavin? Oh, I'm so looking forward. This is just wonderful. Everything, the songs, everything is wonderful. She has such a beautiful voice." At which point, Jackie's publicist looks at Jackie, and Jackie looks at him. They think, "I don't really think this is going to work, is it?"
That's a great. Was he part Gypsy, or am I getting mixed up with somebody else? Did he have links with the?
No, he was. Oh God, what was the name of his band? It's like League of Men or something like that, but it's not that. I can't just think now of it, but check it out, Google it. Anyone who's watching, Google it, and you'll find it.
Don't expect us to do all the work.
Yeah, he's done a book,
any of the work.
And I've just thought who he reminded me of. I couldn't think of the guy's name before, but with his storytelling, he reminds me a bit of Dave Allen.
He does, yeah.
The comedian who also sadly passed away now, but he, as well as telling the stories, he could do it in song as well. So definitely check him out. So great choice, sir. I like that one. And Chen, what is your CD to take with you?
Well, I think anything by a singer called John Prine, who some people may probably heard of better than I have. I discovered him very late in life, and sadly after he passed away and played his last concert in London, not that we can see concerts anymore, but basically it's one of these people you kick yourself thinking, why did I not discover him 20, 30 years earlier? And basically he colonized this grey but very difficult area between folk and country in the States. And his lyrics are kind of quite biting and political, but also very witty. So I'll give you an example of this one, which mixes his disdain for heavy drinking, and the violence it brings, but also the escape it can bring when you've come from a certain kind of life. So this is a a line from one of his songs, which I like quite a lot. And this is possibly based on his life. I was a soldier on the way to Montreal. She was a dancer on the road to alcohol. And kind of example of the kind of way he writes. It's almost like poetry, and he's brilliant. You know, yeah, highly recommended to anyone who's not heard of him. John Prine, any of his songs. He wrote the original. He wrote "I've Broken the Sound of the Speed of Loneliness," which has been covered by plenty of country artists. So you probably know more of his stuff than you realise. But yeah, a concert with him and Jackie Levin would be quite something up in here.
Amazing, wouldn't it? Yeah, yeah.
I met Jackie once at the Rhythm Festival near Bedford, and he was at the side of the stage, I don't know, to sell CDs or whatever, like, and just really, really relaxed, gentle, big guy, very friendly, just really excellent.
Yeah, but yeah, check both of them out. Another one I would recommend who's probably linked a bit to them both, who you guys may possibly have heard of, is John Martin.
Oh, brilliant.
He was another one who could tell some great stories and make them into songs.
Yeah, Solid Air is just, that song should be played at least once a month by everybody.
Definitely.
May You Never.
Yeah, May You Never's my favorite, probably one of my favorite songs of all time. So you'll get me talking about him for a long while if you're not careful. But great choices, and it's going to be an interesting island visit, or an island stay, I should say. So now we're on to a DVD. Now DVDs can be a film, it can be TV series, it might be a live concert. So what would you choose, Paul, for your
Well,
DVD?
I know I was shocked, I tell you, when last week somebody said, can I have the box set of the whole of Dawson's Creek? And I thought, come on, you're not going to be able to fit watching that in an hour, that's for sure. An hour of electricity a week. I was thinking about this, and like my favorite film is The Battle of Algiers, but it's too sad. I'm going to be on this island. I don't want. It's just too sad for me to have that hang on.
Sad enough on the island.
I need some joy and life and color. So I thought, the Blues Brothers. That's it. It's kind of a musical. Lots of singing, lots of dancing, some iconic, great stars.
Yeah.
And so that'll be me dancing around the fire.
Yeah, I'll get you foot tapping,
doing the Watusi and all that sort of thing.
Great shot. Oh, I think we've lost Chen.
Chen has jumped into the Irish Sea to escape.
He's up dancing already. Well, hopefully we will get him back in a minute. So we will continue with your choices for now. So we're now looking at your favourite food. Now it can be a food item or it can be a meal.
I decided that's what I'll go for. I'll keep it simple. I'll go for aloo parathas, which is, so this is going to get me barred from ever going back to Ireland, but it's famous for potato bread, soda bread, and all that sort of thing. But I discovered when I went to India that in fact there is something that's nicer than potato bread, which is aloo paratha, which means the same kind of thing. It's kind of potato bread in Hindi, I guess, or Punjabi, I don't know which. And it's like a flat bread that's got 2 layers, and then you can fill it in the middle, still quite thin. And you could fill it with cauliflower or onions or whatever. Anyway, crushed potato is the one I like best. And it's, fried in almost, in very little ghee. And you can have it with butter, and you can put stuff on it as well, but it is just delicious.
Ooh,
you wouldn't want to have too many of that. You'll end up, quite big. But so I decided I had to admit that this is even nicer than potato bread.
Wow. It'll keep you nice and warm on the island as well too, won't it?
In fact, you could fry a few of them up and then wrap them around you for insulation. Yeah.
That would be good. So we've now got Chen back. Can you hear us, Chen? Because I think you're frozen. Are you with us?
Sorry,
I'm not seeing him.
Sorry about the technical problems, guys.
Oh, here he is.
It's all right,
Apologies.
don't worry.
I was too busy salivating when Paul was talking about aloo porters, which are God's gift to cuisine and the best thing that any human hand has ever made, as far as I'm concerned. So
We
yes,
thought
good
we
choice.
thought you'd gone off dancing to the Blues Brothers.
I'm just off to order my body weight in aloo porters. Actually, I'm just thinking order is arriving soon. So,
Right.
so yeah.
So we were asking you what your DVD choice was.
Right. Yes. Apologies for that interruption. And I would probably be something to cheer me up on the island. Not that Paul would not be enough, for his humour, but probably something like, I think it would need a gut punching, funny, like constant stream of jokes. And I think You Can't Beat the Producers by Mel Brooks. I think that's just it's so audacious and shockingly bad. It's deliberately bad. It's hilarious. And I will laugh before the jokes punchlines come out, which is a sign of a film that you love, I think. And
yeah, definitely.
Really, really would love that. And if I can't have a plate of aloo porters while watching that, then I think something like a chorizo omelette on toast with like a nice brunchy thing like that would be the next best thing on the planet. So
that's your food as well. So you've got your film and you've got your food. So you're made for the evening. That's great. So we're now on the final item to take with you, and this is your luxury item. So it can be whatever it might be. So what is yours going to be, Paul?
Well, this is a difficult one. You're thinking, is it like a house, a boat, a helicopter, or like a Swiss Army, that knife that has every tool you could want, including an umbrella? In the end, I thought, I'm on this island. I know people who have to, sleep in rough, who don't have a choice about it, who do that all the time, that they tell me that the thing they value a lot is clean, dry socks. So if you have, like, I don't know, an unlimited supply of clean, dry socks, then every morning and every night, just put on new socks, and that would immediately lift your mood and think, well, no matter about everything else, looking around in the fog and the rain, horizontal rain probably in the cold, I think, well, at least I've got nice, clean, dry socks.
That is a great choice, and you would be surprised at some of we've had people take hairbrushes, hand cream, a pillow was one choice.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can understand where the socks come from. So at least you have warm feet. So Chen, what is your choice of a luxury item? Oh, he's frozen again.
I'm going to choose an old seven.
Oh, we got that was old.
Choose comfort.
He's an old sock.
An old sock.
I'm going to go for a camper van.
Camper van.
Oh. I'm going to go for a 1970s Volkswagen. That was the best color of my childhood. And yeah, something with like say German number plates. And Paul would be welcome.
Well, I'll tell you what. If you let me in your camper van, I'll let you wear some of my socks. There's the fair deal.
Sounds like a good deal to me. But are you frozen again, sadly? So we can't hear all about your camper van.
You see, he's already on the island.
He's got bad internet. Yeah, he's already on the island. Well, that's great. Well, thank you both.
I remember you said very thick socks, also. That's, I'm gone. I'm gone.
So thank you both very much for all your choices tonight. It's been great, really enjoyed, and I can't believe where the time's gone. We're well over an hour already. So you want to just finish, Paul, by telling us anyone who's sort of come on late or said watching the video late, do you want to tell us about your book again? And
oh yeah, that's right. They're thinking, oh, what is he doing here at all, talking about socks and frying things. Yeah, so the book Blackwater Town, it's by me, and it's look, don't take my word for it. Freddie Forsyth says extremely intriguing.
Ooh.
And you can either read it or you can listen to it. And so Blackwater Town by me. If you've read it, thank you very much. If you're thinking of reading it, that would be good too, and I hope you enjoy it.
And when is the next? I know you said you before we started the interview. You
This is
said
why
about
people go to your island, to avoid questions like this.
Yeah.
When's the next one coming out? I'll
When
tell
you-
you in a minute. Let
when
me
you
off.
get off the island.
Well, I need to get onto the island so I have peace to write it, to finish writing it, but it's underway. So
Anyway, it's
hopefully
one
not
of them,
too long.
Yeah, one of them unknown endings. Yeah, that's great. And just remind people of your website.
It's www.paulwatersauthor, all one word, .com. So paulwatersauthor.com.
Brilliant. And Chen, if you're back with us, any chance of you writing a book at any time? Oh, he got out of that well, didn't he? His internet has crashed. Oh, is he back? No, not sure. We'll give him one last try. Chen, are you with us? Oh, he timed that well. He
I've
got
seen
out
how much
on-
hard work it's for, so probably not.
Probably not.
Work on. You'd have to be mad to write a book, I think.
But great. So now, just to let people know, next week we have got Sam Michaels, which is quite interesting because she writes gangland crime, but set in the Second World War, so 1940. So it's interesting that we've had a few books mentioned tonight in the 40s and 50s. And then on the 22nd of April, we've got Caroline England, and we've got lots more shows planned in the future. So this
Good lineup.
video will be, what was that, sorry?
Good lineup.
Yeah, we've got some crackers coming up, as well as tonight, obviously. And we will post this on YouTube and on all social media tomorrow, so you will be able to share it with all your readers then. So thank you very much, guys. Been great meeting you, and have a great time on the island.
Thank you.
Thank you
Send
very
help
much.
Thank you,
soon.
Joe.
Send help soon.
Take care.
Yeah, we'll send help.
Stay
Bye.
well.
Bye-bye.